Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Enemy Within. This is Tuesday evening, the 21st of July, and we're on peoplesinternetradio.com, where we're seeking solutions. And tonight, hopefully we've got Tom on the line. Hey there, Tom.
Hey, hey.
And I hope you've had a good day, good week.
Tremendous.
Fabulous.
How's yours went this week?
Oh yeah, it's been mad as ever, as it has been since we've gone to 5 shows a week, but hey, it's all good fun. But tonight, I'm very excited because there's a couple of lovely people that I met over at Bolton the other week, and as soon as I heard the gentleman stand up and speak, I thought, I need to get this guy on air. And so tonight, I'd like to welcome to Enemy Within, Deg N Peck.
Hey! Hi! Hi, everybody.
How are you doing, guys?
Excellent, thank you.
Oh, yeah. Utterly in the pink.
Yes. When you stood up and spoke there at the meeting, I thought, wow, this guy's got some serious energy, and I like what he's talking about.
Well, I was up there having the time of my life, Andy.
It was fabulous, wasn't it?
It was exactly what I hoped for. It was bloody brilliant.
It was.
It was the leading edge lawful legal duelists of the day. Fire-spitting monsters to a man, they were. Each one with their own unique angle on a common problem. And they did us the honour of duelling amongst themselves, because if they actually agreed, then they wouldn't be duelists, you know what I mean? So it has to be it's a duelling club full of enemies who are friends. It was beautiful.
It was.
I learned an immense amount from those guys. There you go.
Yeah,
full stop.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it was my first meet-up of that kind, and we got a text message on the way there from one of the guys who was organising it, who I'd spoke to for about 5 minutes, and he said, what you doing, what time are you getting here, firstly, and told him, and he said, well, if you're doing nothing tonight, I'll come and pick you up, you come round my gaff, have a few beers, and have a chat. And that's what we did, and we were made to feel most welcome. Thank you very much, Chris, if you're listening.
Oh, he's lovely. Hey,
yeah,
Chris.
he is. Hey, Chris.
It was, and the people that were there, I mean, Tom Crawford, I think he blew everyone away, because a lot of people are kind of asking questions about Tom, and for me, the man was either telling the whole truth and nothing but the truth, or he ought to be up for an Oscar this year.
Yes. You know what? The interesting thing about the truth movement, and I like them, they are the give-a-fuck crowd,
Hey!
but they are also incredibly anxious, and they've lost their trust in everything, and that you need that before you start asking those sort of difficult questions, don't you? Yeah, that's what precedes difficult questions, is disappointed and pissed off and having lost one's trust. You know, so now one is at siege. And so in the truth movement, we're all together alone because we can't trust what we're bloody looking at. And so naturally, any luminary who stands in front of all that is going to have an audience split into 3. And that audience will be the ones who got it, and that's you and me and Michelle, who can spot a truthful frequency when we see it. And then there will be the other portion of the audience, which is the bewildered and confused, and they're going, what the fuck's going on? What's going on? Does anyone know what's going on? And then, of course, there's the third section of the audience, which is going, no, that's bollocks, that is, I don't buy a penny of it. And there's the audiences, and I gather Jesus had the same problem at the Sermon on the Mount, and so it's part of the tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Do you like that?
Yeah, I mean, what I found while I was there was a very healthy debate amongst people. I mean, there was no arguing and falling out that I could see.
None at all. It was heated debate between friends on matters of enormous importance. You know, I mean, those chaps up there were learning how to deal with common pests, and I think that part of our enlightenment and part of our rising up, really, and this is why the truth movement doesn't have a leader either. It's really important that it doesn't have total agreeance, because that means that it is unstoppable.
Yeah.
Do you catch my drift here, Andy? It's actually, you know, we had the AIDS virus in the 80s, and guess what? We're now behaving like it. And the AIDS virus showed us how to take out a corporation by constantly changing its face.
Yes, constant mutation. Yeah, I like that.
That's right. Look at us here.
Wow.
And so there is so many variations on a theme. And, you know, the duel is with a character who's only got 2 or 3 moves, and yet they can die by 1,000 cuts. And that's what we saw in Bolton. I'm going to shut up now.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't know if you saw the news from Ireland last week that Paul Collington was locked up for supposedly trying to film in court. But the great news is today that Paul's out, and apparently it's been there's been a ruling that it is actually lawful and legal to film in a courtroom in Ireland, which is great news.
Hear, hear. That's the Almighty agreeing with us.
Was that the current law already, and they're just hiding it, or is that a new law?
I don't know, because the law it appears to be slightly different in Ireland on certain things, so I really don't know the details of it.
Okay. I would suggest that the law is the same everywhere. The only difference is that various corporations have slightly different twists on the matter. And the laws that you chaps are referring to are, from my perspective, merely a privately owned, shareholder-driven company's policy.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got to tell you that this insighty rising up thingy that we're all doing is nothing more than being discerning and argumentative with people you used to tug your forelock to and agree with. It's nothing more than that. And one finds that when one does present an argumentative stance, they retreat.
Yeah,
it's an interesting thing. That's why, you know, and I think they're probably quite relieved about it, because this awakening that seems to be going on is also happening within the corporate mechanism. Bear in mind, only a tiny percentage of the corporate mechanism is entirely insightful and thoroughly committed to whatever that agenda is. The rest of them, the leaves and the branches and the twigs, don't really have much of a clue, except that they have a clue, because they're having to deal with all the letters that we write go through the typing pool first. You know what I mean? They go through someone's hands.
Well, one of the things I really like about People's Internet Radio is there's such a knowledgeable chat room, and I'm being corrected as we speak. Unique Lee says the laws are pieces of legislation. We got all that. And Ken says no such thing as a new law. Good to see you in the chat room, by the way, Ken. Glad you could make it.
Yes. What a classy audience we got.
Oh,
absolutely.
There's loads in the
well,
chat
I
room
did
tonight.
actually mean a new piece of legislation rather than a law.
Yeah.
Was that Ken?
That was the Ken, the rock star, yeah.
Ken.
Hey,
Yo, Ken.
Because
Yeah, absolutely. Huge. Yeah.
Oh.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Good for him. Good for Ken, and good for that guy for getting out of court. Absolutely. Not being closed into a corner and contracted on a matter. You know,
excellent.
That's.
They did lock him up for a few days, but he's been released today.
We're playing you know what? It's an interesting thing. We're playing quite a rough game, but it doesn't actually have to be rough, because the men, and this is the point that I'm going to make here about this duel that we're all having with our corporation at the moment, and that is that it's teeth arms. Okay, it's teeth, and that would mean the chaps in blue, the chaps in green, and all those chaps. You know, those fellows are not, in their hearts, bad.
No.
And I say that because I was a soldier for 6 years, which means entirely fucking stupid. taking orders from people who are more small and petty than me, and with bloody guns. You know, that's a mad contract to go into. So I was a soldier for 6 years, and you can't get more asleep than when you're a soldier until trauma wakes you up.
Uh-huh.
And I think that this is true of the police. I think this is true of the armed soldier chaps. I think it's true of everyone who has to go into their cave, their traumatic cave, where they have to discover who they actually are and then grow from where they find themselves. You know, once you realise that you're actually a hired thug and you can't get away from the notion, you now have questions with your honour. And those men have honour in that they all joined those organisations because they wanted to save the princess and get laid. That's what soldiers are. They've read all those comics, their pants are on the fucking outside, they reckon force is a reasonable option, and I don't know why they got to the getting laid bit, because none of the superheroes get laid, do they? They don't.
Superman did.
He didn't.
Yes, he did.
Did Superman get laid?
Lying.
No, it was unconsummated.
Was it really?
Lying.
Come
Did
on,
they have
Tom,
a baby?
you must be the expert.
We're going to have to get...
Digressing now.
Pretty well.
So chaps grow up. You see, that's the point I'm making. And what's interesting is that the young are not that interested, and the ones who are in are losing their confidence. And it's not as if there's a fucking queue to join these organisations. That's why they're recruiting so actively. Do you see my point?
Yes.
When the customer yes, yeah.
So was it your time in the armed forces that kind of brought about your awakening then, Mark?
No, I had a fantastic time saving the princess and trying to get laid.
And travelling to foreign countries and killing people?
Well, I was the soft end in that I was the medic.
Oh, that would be, yeah.
And no, that is equally dishonourable, because if you're going to be... You know, medics are entitled to shoot people as well, and you're still supporting a nasty corporate mechanism which is delivering bullets to someone. You know, so just because I was a medic means that I was equally corrupted. However, because I didn't get around to actually hurting anybody or killing anybody, I managed not to come out of that organisation with the soul scars that chaps bear when they do those things. Because when you assault or violate or another without doing it in self-defence, I hasten to add, when you actively offer that service to another, you're going to be in soul cost. You know, it's not a soul credit matter, it's a soul cost. And so your life force will now be depleted to a degree. And that's why we find all these poor broken buggers on the streets being homeless and whatnot. You know, being a soldier has no future to it at all these days. Fascinatingly.
No, absolutely. I mean, when I was younger, I looked at joining the army, and thankfully they didn't want me. I'm not quite sure what that was. I got a few hints. But me being me, I didn't just go for the kind of run-of-the-mill regiment. I went for the intelligence corps, which is a bit of a laugh when you know me, but I've just got a bit of an aptitude for learning languages, and for some reason I got the top marks in the language learning test, and they were desperate for linguists, but 2 weeks later they phoned me up and said, no vacancies. And I went, ooh, that's strange. So obviously I'd done something in my previous days that debarred me from serving there. But I'm really glad that it did now.
Well, you had some divine fortune there. It wasn't your path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I travelled around a bit when I was younger, and I was a motorbike race mechanic, and I think it was one or two of the things that happened behind the Iron Curtain in those days. You know, if you'd even been the other side of the Iron Curtain, you were looked as a bit of a security risk, so that probably did me the favour there.
Yes. Highly likely.
Uh-huh.
You were unattractive to that corporation.
I'm just generally unattractive, mate.
I've seen you in the flesh, and I must say you have a rare appeal.
Well, rarely appeal, that's probably not.
As in, you're unfeasibly good looking, which is probably why you've chosen to hide your gorgeousness on the radio.
Absolutely, I've got a perfect face for radio, yeah.
Yeah, so the point that I'm making is that these soldiers and these police officers that we're duelling with aren't committed. They're corporate, they're losing their faith and their trust in their organisation, which is the process of insight and awakening, and, most importantly, these gentlemen have resisted the invitation to bear arms on 3 occasions, to my understanding, and this is the police force. They've tried to arm them on at least 3 occasions, and the chaps turned around and said no, because that would mean we'd have to shoot them. And so now, the police force, with its 130,000, that's an old figure by the way, 130,000 teeth arms, that's men, on the streets, only 7,000 of them are arms trained. Now,
Sorry, just was going to say, it's very interesting the times before Dunblane when there was a lot more armed people in this country. Our police force still wasn't armed.
That's correct.
And you're right, every time they try to arm our police force, it's the police force themselves who say, we don't want that, we enforce by consent. We don't
That's
want
right.
That now, if I've got a gun, somebody's going to point a gun at me. They don't want that.
Well, you see, they had the insight and the enlightenment to realise that if they had weapons, they'd have to shoot their own people. Now, that tells you about the character of the police force. Mm-hmm. Do you get me? I mean, for instance, all of Europe, they bear arms.
Yeah.
But here, they choose not to, because they would rather be bluff rugby player types than proper psychos. Now, that's a force that you can turn into something very, very beautiful once you take the corruption and the force notion out of it. You know, because I think that after that corporation falls, which it inevitably will, because all corporations do, especially if they're crap, once that corporation falls, we will then require something else with which to deal with nutters, because there is a percentage of nutters, is there not? Mm-hmm. People who don't need any punishment or any weirdness like that, but people who do need to be contained for our safety and indeed for theirs.
Don't we call them the government?
We do currently. I'm talking after that time, when one just has a genuine nutter that needs a fucking good hug and a cup of tea, and to be taken away from where he's causing threat or damage to folk until he calms down. That's what I'm talking about. And I would need characters who would be able to do that sort of thing without violating the guy. That would be interesting. And that is, I think, the future of our... And I won't call them peacekeepers, because we ain't got no peace currently. But I would call them peacemakers, because they would be able to go into an area of conflict and bring harmony as opposed to dominance. And that would mean containing the problem until it was not a problem any longer, and allowing everybody else to do their thing, to live. Wouldn't that be an interesting force to have? Or energy. I don't want to call it a force. I want to call it an energy.
Well, they're no longer titled the police force. They're the police service, aren't they?
Well,
allegedly.
Yes. But, you know, when a chap's walking around armed and armoured, trained in coercion up to including death, with a long list of iniquitous contracts behind him, I don't really care what he calls his company. He's a racketeer. Mm-hmm. And so that's my position, my personal position. If a man advances upon me armed and armoured, I know that he does not have the best intentions at heart. Otherwise, he wouldn't have to come to work dressed in that manner.
A lot of cops are waking up. Just before this show, actually, I saw a nice little bit of news. The head of Durham Police, where I'm at, has said that his force are no longer going to target anybody growing cannabis for personal use.
Where's that?
Now you're talking.
I want to move there.
Well, you know what? This is what's happening. Here in Bedfordshire, we had a very, very interesting experience. In that, the Chief Constable, a chap who likes to refer to himself as the ringmaster, for obvious reasons, I suspect, he wanted to increase his remit in the council tax because he needed some more lolly to have some more chaps engaged in commerce. And so he put it to the vote here in Bedfordshire, and they had a referendum on it. And 2 out of 3 said, no thank you, mate. There's no way I'm going to give you an extra 15p a week. Now, that is a serious message to a corporation to find out that its clients do not love it. And once it knows that, it is therefore commercially bound to sort out its public image, which probably means being less of a knob. And that is what I expect. That's what you're talking about. That's what's happening up there. All right, the stoners can grow cannabis. There we go. That's a nice action. And what we'll be looking for from these chaps is a shitload of those moves, because nobody's interested in cash crime. Nobody cares about offences created over sacred pieces of paper. It's ridiculous. It's like Monopoly. Those matters can never be important than a man or a woman or a child, can they? They can't. Ridiculous. And so when the peacemakers behave like peacemakers, which is not waging war upon us, we will then love them and support them, and that corporation will have a future. If they don't have the wherewithal to adjust their commercial approach, they will become history, the same as any other dodgy corporation that's suddenly discovered to be not nearly as nice as everybody thought. Mm. And I would give you that example. The most significant version of that is Ratner's back in the 80s. His company vanished in a month. Nationwide it was. And somebody caught him saying, our stuff's crap. And the public went, you are selling us crap, and you know you're selling us crap. And that therefore means you must think we're shit. And the British public just did what they do always. They just turned their backs on him and stopped feeding him revenue and objected to his process, and lo and behold, he ceased to be. His entire company vanished. He was being picked over by the lowest of the low within a month. So, that's corporations for you. That's commerce.
Yeah.
And we're all commerce.
Well, one thing that I found quite interesting, the kind of deeper I've got involved in what I'm doing, is there's an awful lot of activists, campaigners, whatever you like to call yourselves, who are telling me that there's people high up in the authoritarian structure, in the police force, in government, in all these large corrupt organisations who've had enough of it, and they're coming over to the good side, our side.
Yes, of course that will happen. Of course. Many of them will be false. Because to rise to a position of power within those organisations means you have to be better at bullying and lying and thieving than everybody else. Those are the prime commercial requirements to advance in a corporation. Make sense? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, of course. Because commerce is profit, and profit is about my share, your share, and then me actually getting a bit more of your share, actually. That's profit, and that's profit. And so that involves lying, cheating, and stealing. Obviously. So to rise to a position of prominence in a corporation means that you are proficient with the skills of a duelist. Now, bear in mind this, Andy, I don't look down on these people, because those skills are not only evident within human society, but they're also evident within nature. And so this is actually the way the planet is supposed to be, full of prey and predators, because that's what nature is. And what's interesting about nature is they do it all with blood. That's how nature does it. They eat you. Whereas man does it with money, which is fake blood, so that we can duel again and again and again. That's the situation we find ourselves in. It's fascinating. It's perfectly natural. What isn't natural is the fact that the prey class, and that means the sleepy ones amongst us, are so asleep that the predator runs the risk of causing our extinction. And that's never a good thing for a predator when he's got no one to predate upon. And that imbalance needs to be corrected. And this is where we, the prey, suddenly need to wake up to the notion, and then we become predators. And we can predate upon the corporation the same way the corporation can predates on us. once we recognise its deceit and its honour. And all we have to do is stand in truth and have some bloody honour, love, which means I didn't go around booting, killing, lying, cheating and stealing yesterday. You know, that's honour, as opposed to you who did. And it's game on, really. It's very, very simple. And in the heart of all of us, there is this sense of fairness. And I think that that's the bit that is waking up in us. You know, that's why people are outraged when they bear witness to bullies. It offends their sense of fairness. And to be seen to be a bully, to be recognised as a bully, which is a bit fucking clear when you're walking around in an armoured vest with a bloody great big stick down your leg, and yesterday you were spraying CS gas into the face of children. You know what I mean? It's a clue, isn't it? That's a bully. And that the same applies to a bailiff, who will go and take matter from families who are busy struggling to feed themselves, otherwise they would have paid the bill. You see? These are the values that we're going to be looking at, I think, as this mechanism decays around us, which it jolly well is. And when those boys defect from the top end, which was your point, guess what? They will dedicate their skills to us, and they will undo their masters. And that will be beautiful, because they won't be betraying their masters, they will be discovering their honour and undoing some of the shit that they contributed into creating. You get that is the selfless act. That's the big decision that every man has to make in his life. It's beautiful, isn't it?
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's about the people realising that the people have the power, and just the same with the police. The head of Durham Police, like I was mentioning, he realises, hang on a minute, this is my jurisdiction. I know what's going on here. I've been in the force for over 20 years. What's the point in arresting people for this when I can concentrate on violent crime? You actually said, what's the point in arresting a drug addict? Why don't we just give them the drugs from the NHS and then wean them off?
Yes. Now there's a fella you would be willing to support. You know, he seems to have his head screwed on. You know, obviously.
He's meeting up with police forces across Europe. They've got completely different approaches to ours. He's seen a lot of stuff on documentaries, obviously, and he's went over himself and he's going, hang on a minute, this works. Hang on a minute, I'm actually in control of my jurisdiction here. Stuff you.
That's right, and my client base likes me, and they pay me, do you mind? So sod off, central government. So long as the place is peaceful and well, we're a different police force now, and that's what we need, and that's what we expect, actually. I'm delighted to hear it happening in where? Rotherham, did you say?
Durham.
Right. Yeah, it hasn't happened in Rotherham yet, has it? No, it hasn't. They'll probably join the party later.
Well, that's what I'm hoping. This is a sign that the tide will turn, because other police forces are obviously going to look at his approach and go, right, we'll see how this pans out in a year or two time. You'll see other police forces doing the same thing, or doing it other approaches to other crimes that are really irrelevant to the big picture.
Well, I agree with you. No more cash crime. No more of that silly stuff. Just deal with the matter of peace, and that's dealing with violent crime, as you say, and you know, assaults on property and person. That's it. That's property and a man, a woman, a child. You know, there's stuff and them. That's what you're supposed to be protecting. Nothing else matters.
No victim, no crime.
You know it exactly. All that fiction can be over now, and I think that, you know, it's an interesting thing. Discussions like this on air, where there might be another 5 people listening. That's part of the energy. Because people are poor and desperate, and it makes them imaginative. And you know, I've noticed this, Andy. When things get really, really crap, we get really, really good, British-wise. It really does pull people together. The crappier it gets, the tighter they become, and the more efficient and worthy they become. So, yeah, that's what I'm expecting to happen.
There's an interesting comment here from Lee in the chat room. He said, the way I see it, we've got 2 choices. Either we pull support to all commercial banks, empty and close the accounts, expose the lack of reserves they simply don't have, and possibly control this ourselves, or we allow the banks to play the fiddle and we dance to it when they see fit to drop the hammer. we've already crossed the Rubicon, as the Greeks.
Yes, he's right. There is a third option. Mm-hmm. And the third option is that we fall out of love with money. And we stop admiring vulgar fuckers who clearly have an enormous excess of it, whilst there are people starving down the road. You know, we have spent many, many years looking up to breadheads who have no values and lots of jewellery. Now, one of the consequences of insight is that your values change. And all of a sudden you think that love might be important, and being really good with people might be important, and actually being an honour might be important. And to be in excess when the rest of the world is in dearth is not an honourable position. You've got to give it away. And Carnegie in the US said this. He said, a man who dies wealthy dies in disgrace. And he knew what he was talking about. And that does not only mean social civil disgrace, that means soul disgrace. Because if you have remedy, and if you have power, and you're withholding it because you don't realise the value of another being, sacred being wearing a skin suit over there, who is obviously wildly more important than a Ferrari, or in fact wildly more important than all the Ferraris that have ever been made or ever will be made. You know, one is a living being, sentient and conscious, and the other is matter, is a product. Be real. You know, one of them has value, the other is disposable. When we see that, we will be able to look at people showing off their wealth in order to get laid, and we'll be able to look at them and think, you're not getting laid because you know fuck all about love, and actually your wealth is to your embarrassment. You clearly have no heart. And you know what? They'll get the kind of girls who that appeals to. And we've seen what happens from there. You know, once we lose fascination with these princesses and princes and start valuing firstly ourselves and then everyone else, because that's what happens. Once you value yourself, you're capable of valuing another. If you don't value yourself, you're fucked. You're faking it. You don't know how to do it. You can't value another. The same thing goes for love, of course. If you can't love yourself, you cannot love another. You're crippled in your technique and in your skill and your application. You're a fraud. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And we're in a world which is questing for an authenticity that it has missed for so long. And it's coming forward. It's coming forward, and it comes forward in poverty and in contrivance. And those are the ingredients of love. There's no commerce in love. That's why there's poverty there. There's no trade in it. And there's contrivance, which is making the best of what you got. And look at our nation stepping up in this way. And Tom Crawford, you know, from the front line, he came back to that meeting room and showed us how rough it could jolly well get. I didn't see anyone chickening out at that point. I only saw them pledging love to him. And I don't know the quality of his individual duel there. But it's his duel, and he's fighting a monster. And therefore he deserves our support. That's it. You know.
Very well said there. I've just actually got a message for you there from the chat room. And it's from Susie. I believe she's listening in.
Hi, Susie.
But she can't make it into the chat room tonight. She sends her apologies, but I'm sure she'll be enjoying the show. And if she's got any message, I'm sure she'll get one through to me on Skype or what's that other social thing? Shitbook. Yeah.
I don't know. Have you got telekinesis over there? Have you?
With Susie, that works pretty well. Yeah. Yeah, we just pick up a crystal and we don't need Skype.
Yeah, song it on, mate. Come on, this is what this entire Ascension gig is all about. I don't need my iPhone anymore. I can just do it by touching my nose. Yeah. Come on, Andy. Shut up now. Get a word in edgeways.
I wondered if Tom got anything to say. He's been quiet tonight.
What I was going to say is, on the issue of wealth, a lot of people ask the question of wealthy people, how much money is enough? But it's a mentality of, oh, well, I'm going to make much money as I can and then pass it on to my future generations. So basically they're going to get everything for nothing. And as you can see from all of the people in our society who get everything for nothing, the biggest misfits in our society.
They have all the depth of a puddle.
Mm-hmm.
It's just entirely and utterly, pathetically repulsive. And I see no art and I see no love in it. All I see is commercial branding. You know, you've become an advertisement for your favourite product supplier. How banal to be obsessed with your nails and your heels, whilst actually we have a concentration camp in Bedford. Did you know that? It's called Yarl's Wood. It's a detention centre. I don't think it's a detention centre. I think it's a concentration camp. All that's missing is the ovens, you know what I mean? Run by GS4. I'm really lowering the tone of this. Let's pick it up a bit. Bloody hell. So, yeah, everything's going to be fine, really.
Yeah. Well, I suppose now would be a good time to have a wee break. We didn't get any tunes off you, so I'm going to give you a choice of Bob Marley or Jimi Hendrix.
Let's go a bit Jimmy.
Jimmy first, and then we'll have Bob after.
That's cool then. Okay, well, we're just going to take a wee break, and we'll be back in about 4 minutes, folks.
You're listening to www.peoplesinternetradio.com. Seeking solutions.
Good evening, welcome back. We are seeking solutions tonight with my co-host Tom and Deg N Peck as our guests. And I'd just like to mention to everyone that we are entirely listener supported. None of us get paid for doing this. We're just here to get the information out. So if you've got a few quid to spare, a few euros or drachmas or zlotys or whatever you've got, if you could just pop over to the website and click on the donate button, and we'd be very grateful, and it'll help keep us going. Thank you very much. And
we will also accept cows, sheep, bushels of corn, anything from Yugoslavia.
We live in a first floor flat. That could be tricky.
Well, it's just about moving it on, love. I mean, that's the corporate mechanism, is it not? But this leads us neatly on to Soul Credit and the Selfless Act.
Yes.
Ooh. Now, I'm interested in the Selfless Act because it is the central...
Oh, hello. Have we gone? Are you there, Mark, still? Yeah. It appears we've lost him. We'll get him back in if we can. So, boom, add people to the Yeah, you keep singing, Tom. I'll get him back in.
I think you hit the nail on the head, though, where he's talking about necessity breeds innovation. We've had an argument so many times with, well, not an argument, a debate with a lot of people that have been on the show who have a utopian way of looking at things, maybe a zeitgeist way of looking at things, that we can all just work together and everything will be fine. But you're never going to get rid of sociopaths and psychopaths. And somebody is always going to want to steal from somebody else, even though things are abundant. If somebody's an artist and can create paintings, they'll steal that. Anybody who can make their own stuff, they're just going to steal that. And other various things. You're never going to get rid of crime completely. Live in this fantasy that crime will be eradicated in the future.
Yeah. Well, don't you think that if we have that situation of abundance for all, that we'll be able to deal with the crime ourselves in our own small little social groups, rather than have this national Gestapo squad that are stomping all over everyone to try and get them to do as they're told?
Well, certainly that's like a libertarian way of looking at things, of looking after yourself, private property and self-ownership.
Uh-huh.
Well, I think we've got Deg N Peck.
Hey, guys.
Oh, welcome back. Welcome back. The Skype gods are playing us up again, as usual.
Well, it happens. What was Tom saying? Tom was going to make a point about available options.
Just as you were offline, I was saying that you hit the nail on the head, that necessity breeds innovation. We've had so many debates on this show with people who think that we can have a utopian-type zeitgeist future where it's a resource-based society and crime will be eradicated overnight, but you're never going to get rid of sociopaths and psychopaths. That's what I was saying.
That's an interesting point, because I agree with you. Because a species with such variety as us, you know, a lot of those psychopaths and whatnot, they turn themselves into artists. It's a very vivid being, you know, to be willing to submit itself to the yield of being a psychopath. You know, that's a tough path. It's got costs. You know what I mean? So, and they make us as a species exciting. But when I look at our future, mankind's future, I see it's really simple actually. Currently, we have a situation where nobody is engaged their life force and their power. Therefore, they have to subcontract most of their prime requirements to another. So they've been disempowered. Now tomorrow, as we wake up, as we engage in consciousness, which makes us more powerful, it fills us with life force, and therefore vivifies our creations. When you've got life force, your creations become more quickly. That makes sense, doesn't it? Of course it does. So you need power. And in the natural world, you know, there are many ways to live. And that is also true within what we call the technosphere, or man's creation, which is the corporate entity that we currently exist within as a metaphor. Does that make sense? It barely, doesn't it? It barely makes sense. I've gone all fucking... You think I'm doing fine? Okay. So, what's going to happen is that instead of allowing ourselves to be weaklings, and instead of allowing ourselves to be ignorant, we will become the opposite of that. We will become powerful, and we will become knowledgeable. You know, after great darkness always follows great light. That's Renaissance. And when the education system's getting dumbed down, when the libraries are getting taken away, when you know, the kids are Xbox crazy, all that kind of stuff, you know, the entire mechanism is imploding into clonehood. Because if you're pre-conscious, then you're just a corporate program. You're not actually here. When you're conscious, you can actually relate to the world with a degree of appreciation for it and an understanding of how it works. And that's what consciousness looks like. It looks like relaxed, powerful, fairly well, having a nice time. That's what consciousness looks like. If you haven't got all those things, then you may consider that you're on the ascent to that place that we call consciousness, which is where happiness finds itself, actually, interestingly enough. And you can take that example and you can use it with the most learned, and you can also actually use it with the most simple. And I don't mean that in a derogatory manner. I mean pure. So, for instance, a damaged child, you know, an enormous burden to contend with. And yet, note the vividity that can come through them. Note the life force that comes through them. You know, that's a being on ascent to consciousness through trial. And I think that that's an exquisite example of what actually we're all going through. And we're all going to go through it, because you can't leave anyone behind, really. I mean, some won't make it. That's another matter. But when a species decides to upgrade in its vividity and its consciousness, it just jolly well does so. And what's fascinating about this place in which we are is that you don't actually have to know how to make or how to fix the car. You just have to know how to drive it, you know? And I think that when people learn how to drive their life energy and become empowered, which means not being ignorant and not being weak, you know, those two things go together, we then find ourselves in a world full of equals. And it's a much, much, much nicer place. So this is our evolution. We're actually becoming better people because we're just not going to allow ourselves to be so shit. Because if you are compromised in this place, and if you are hypnotized, and if you are pre-conscious, you will be taken by the machine, of course. And that looks like you've got to go to Next to get all your clothes, because they're the only people who know what to wear. And you've got to go to Tesco's to get all your food, because they're the only people who know what to eat. So on and so forth, so on and so forth, so on and so forth. So when we've exploded past those limitations into the actual world proper, we're only existing. Mankind is only existing primarily in 5% of what's available here. There's this huge, glorious place in which we are that has all kinds of energies that we have yet to discover. And none of them have anything to do with Nintendo or Microsoft or Apple. They all have to do with what's happening inside your head, what's happening inside your heart, what's happening inside your hara or your womb, your creative energy, and what's happening in your environment. And whether you are connected to it and engaged and therefore comfortable, or disconnected and therefore confused and probably polluted. Those are the choices, really. You have to be able to look after yourself. And if you can't break through the program that says, I cannot make decisions about my own well-being, I must subcontract it to somebody who knows a bit more than me, then if you have the mind of a slave, you will therefore be one until you finally realise that there is another way to be. And I think that's a soul path too. What's important, boys and girls and everyone, is that enough of us wake up to just chug up that machine with a bit of paperwork and cause it to evolve itself. And we're doing that, I think. I can see that all over the place. When a corporation contracts and brings its offices in from the field, it's because business is a bit rough. And we're seeing Bedfordshire and Cambridgeshire and Hertfordshire constabularies having to amalgamate. Because, they're not creating the revenue required or creating the effect required to support that corporation. So it's a cutthroat world in corporate land. If you can't do the work, you won't make it, and you'll have to contract, and you contract, and some corporations never expand again. And some just die after the contraction. So looking at this boiling pot of commerce and looking at it from the commercial perspective and from where the money's going and from how the social trends are going, I've got to tell you guys, I find it intensely encouraging. Intensely encouraging because it only needs about 20%. And when I last looked, 86% of people paid their parking tickets and a boisterous 16% put up an argument. And I saw that statistic about 5 years ago. I can only presume, since I now fight my own parking tickets too, that statistic will have increased. And it doesn't take much. It doesn't take everybody. It just takes about a quarter dynamic to the other 3/4 passive. Who's going to make the waves? It's looking really pucker, I must say. I'm going to shut up now and let somebody else get a word in edgeways. It's my fucking favourite subject. I'm an enthusiast, It's hard for me to shut up on the matter. Thank God it's not trains.
It's an absolute pleasure to listen, Mark. Funny you should mention Tesco, actually, because I was having a conversation with one of our upcoming guests who called me to do a quick check on his Skype.
Yep.
He'd been out and purchased a new headset today, and he said he went to Tesco's, and he said, unfortunately, I had to pay for it because it was a bit too big to fit in my pocket. And I said, I like your style, being as it's Tesco's. I said, I hate them with a passion. And he said, well, I've brought my kids up well. I've taught them all to steal from Tesco's.
Well, it's still stealing, love, but you can't lose your sense of humour over all this stuff.
Oh, no.
It's entirely quite funny.
Well, when I worked as a truck driver, they actually held me prisoner, and I got the gate guard arrested at the distribution depot for not letting me out to get a sandwich because they wouldn't let me in the canteen after I'd been there 12 hours.
Good grief.
Yeah.
That must have been a fun set of letter writing. So what happened after that?
I broke the barrier down with my truck, and they called the police, and the policeman came over to me and he said, what's the crack? And I said, well, that guy there won't let me out to get some food. I've been here 12 hours. They won't let me have anything to eat in the canteen. And he just went over and arrested the gate guard, which was absolutely hilarious.
Yes. And what was Tesco's reason for keeping you in that position?
I think it was just because I was a truck driver and I was scum. That's their view on things. You have to have an actual security guard escort you to go in the building to go to the toilet there.
Yes. Because you're utterly untrustworthy and not of their corporation.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, that's the way corporations behave with one another, which is why they're so easy fucking targets. Because they all loathe each other. It's wonderful. They're like the French. They despise everybody. I like the French because they're reliable. They do. They despise everybody, and they also despise other Frenchmen, and they all despise the Parisians, and the Parisians despise everybody. So you know where you are with those guys.
Yes.
It's reassuring. It's lovely. You look down their noses at everybody. And that is entirely the same as a corporation, except that it doesn't appreciate the fine wine, food and sex, and stray films.
I found a really refreshing attitude among the natives that I met when I lived in Spain. Now, we have a lot of immigration into the area that I live in. There's a lot of Eastern European workers doing the land work jobs. We're in a agricultural area, and they're treated very badly by the locals. Oh, you're over here stealing our jobs. But when I was over in Spain, people said to me, "Oh, where do you come from?" And because I'd learned a bit of Spanish, I thought, "Oh, well, pass for whatever." But they always said, "Where do you come from?" Slight pause. Russia. And I kept saying, "What's going on?" Everybody thinks I'm Russian. And it turned out that I speak Spanish with a Russian accent. But when I said, "No, I'm from England," they shrugged their shoulders and said, "Es igual, todos European." So it doesn't matter, we're all European, which is such a refreshing attitude.
It is, isn't it?
If I'd probably just said, "Sorry, I'm English,"
why the army didn't hire you.
If I'd probably said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm English, I don't speak Spanish," they'd have probably went, "Yeah, stuff you as well."
Yes. Yes. You made the effort, Andy. It's a beautiful thing to do. I think the United Kingdom is the only kingdom where we just can't be bothered to learn anybody else's language. We're famous over the world for it. Mm-hmm. English! That's it, coming through!
But that's the education system. In Europe, they learn languages from the start of school. If you go to Belgium, people speak 6 languages. You have to speak one word and they instantly go into English. It's really annoying, really. I'm annoyed about the education system. It's just...
Well, don't be annoyed at them, just see their method. Because if you are going to be a dominator and a conqueror, of course you're going to teach the bloody natives your language. Then they become yours. Mm-hmm. And that is why English is the commercial language. So, yeah, our arrogance betrays our position. A dominator only speaks his own language and forces everybody else to speak theirs. To speak his too. Isn't that fascinating? A rather more open-hearted, open-minded character would have the grace to learn the language of his neighbours.
It's arrogance by our education system, arrogance by our government itself. For me and other people who go to foreign countries, it's an embarrassment. Like you don't speak another language.
Yeah, but I would have to say... I have to say that it was always, it was the working man who was encouraged not to bloody learn a language, so he couldn't make any foreign friends. Mm-hmm. All the aristocracy spoke languages. They spoke English. They either spoke Italian or French, and if they were really hip, they spoke Spanish, which is considered to be a bit of a peasant country. So, which is funny because it owns most of Latin America and is in fact the other language on earth. So, yes, all the aristocracy spoke those languages, and they were also probably taught Latin so that they could work their way through law. Mm-hmm. And then, us lot down here, you know what I mean? No interest in that sort of thing at all. Too busy trying not to get killed by our master.
I had a history teacher at school. She used to teach Latin in her spare time on a lunchtime. There was a lot of people went in to learn Latin with her. She was the best teacher that I ever had because she used to teach you real history instead of from the curriculum. She'd give you the curriculum stuff, and then while you were writing it down, she would teach you real history. She would just talk about real stuff.
A pocket revolutionary then. This probably explains your path in life.
Maybe so.
Yeah. She gave you the inquiry, didn't she?
Well,
Otherwise, you wouldn't have bothered learning languages.
Well, I think to spark, I started this show about 6 years ago now, but I hadn't even read a book since school. I'm 33 now. So 6 years ago I started this show, and I read more books in 1 year after watching a couple of documentaries and going, hang on a minute, what's this? I didn't know about this, I didn't know about that. So I read more books than I ever did in my whole life in 1 year.
Excellent. Why, Andy? What brought you to this place, this inquisitive and anxious place?
No, that was Tom. I'd struggle to read a book a month.
Well, it was just a spark of information from seeing things in documentaries which I hadn't watched before, and information that I hadn't found before. So I was like, hang on a minute, how have I come to this point now and not know about this stuff? I want to read as many books as possible in the next year.
So it wasn't a trauma that brought you to this place of seeking. It was just dazzling curiosity about the unknown. What a beautiful way to live.
Well, it was the opening of a door, really. It was saying there was information.
Yes.
Oh, hang on a minute. There's this I'm actually interested in, and I didn't even know about it.
Well, you see, there you go. That's a beautiful way to live, Andy. That's engaged and interested. Sorry, Tom. Sorry, mate.
Don't mind being called Andy. It's all right.
No, well, you can call me Andy too. I'm not fussy.
It's better than Tim, isn't it?
Yeah, Tim or Dave or whatever. It's always funny when the guests get your name wrong anyway. You're called all sorts of names.
Do you like that sort of thing?
Well, it's better than the names you get called on Twitter.
Well, you can call me what you like as long as you don't call me late for dinner.
We won't call you late for dinner, Andy.
That's
Lovely man.
But you were saying people need to move away from monetary means, money, and it's
I think
it is now. What do you see the future in your ideal future? More of a barter system?
No, I see. You see, I see money. I don't have a problem with money. Everyone's fucked up over money. It's just silly. Because in nature they do it all with blood. Mm-hmm. But in man society we do it with money. That's what we duel over and with and about. So it's an iconic sacred piece of paper that the deluded worship because they think it's really important and they've got to have as much of it as possible and everyone will think they're wonderful. That's where we are.
I think one of the biggest things is we've been tricked into being led by the weakest in our society, where in our natural form we are a tribal being and we do have leaders, but in a tribal form the leader's always the strongest of the tribe, the most moral of the tribe, the one that we look up to. Now it's
not yet. Yeah. Yes, the leaders of the tribe were, you know what, the leader, this is the evolution. I think that there are some pygmies, for instance. I lived with a tribe of pygmies for about 6 months down in the Congo because I didn't know anything. I was doing mad things. Anyway, I was down there with them, and they don't have a chief. They don't have a chief. What they have is some couple of blokes who, generally speaking, give great perspective, and as a consequence of which, those blokes are the ones that people tend to listen to.
Elders.
Now, not necessarily, because when you're a pygmy, you don't live entirely that long. Oh. You know, you might make it to 60-something, or whatever. You know, it's a fast burn being a pygmy, but they have a unified consciousness in that they can tell what each other is thinking. They also have a pretty good knowledge of the forest and what it can give them and how to live in it. And they also have this really childlike notion that the forest goes on forever and actually everything's okay. And as a consequence of which, for them, everything is okay, in that they relate cheerfully to what is precisely in front of them. That's the point. That's what they do. They relate cheerfully to what is in front of them. And as a consequence of which, people who feel good tend to do well. They tend to do well. And therefore, they are a robust and sustainable people. Does that make sense? Yes, it does. And they don't have any leaders because they're argumentative fuckers. You know what I mean? They're conscious. And the thing about being conscious is you're bound to see it slightly different to the other chap. But the people will recognise reason, and they will homogenise the extreme positions into this beautiful, generally speaking, quite medium path, which is the one of most stability and balance. And that's how they do it. And I think that's how we all do it, really. After we finish listening to the orators, we then decide to make up our own minds because we discover that we've got one and that we didn't leave it in Next or Tesco's or at school. And that's the ascension. That's engaging with where we are and how it is, instead of being perpetually disappointed about how it isn't. You know, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? This is no time for misery and doom-mongering. This is a time for vivid being and empowerment and cheer. You know, Tom Crawford is in the middle of a battle that involves his dreams in dust. It involves his property, okay? Now, he is attached to that property and will therefore suffer anguish when it is assaulted. Now, if I get that property into context with his life, and I stick it into a life of 90 years or something, this incident becomes very, very tiny, although significant, but it becomes very, very small. And none of the property that he was hanging on to at that time, which caused him such pain in its loss, will be of any significance 20 years down the line. Do you see my point? Mm-hmm. So therefore, it is possible, I don't know if I could do it, but it will be possible to go to battle and to lose everything and still win, and still feel great, and still feel wonderful. Because the battle can be evaluated by the quality of the condition of the survivor. And that'll be the one who's freest. And Tom Crawford is discovering a certain freedom here. He's saying what he means. He's taking on huge, huge corporate dragons made of paper. You know, they've behaved in the most vulgar manner, and he is unbowed. And when he told us about that story about facing off that brick shithouse bloke in his hallway for 4 hours, you know, I don't fancy any of those engagements, thank you very much. But I will support a chap who stands up for them, certainly. And I wish the chap who stands up for them to be as robust and as balanced as possible, so therefore he can cope with the fictions that are the injuries. You know what I mean? The fictions that are the injuries. And that means, if I break a window, you know what, I will get over it. It's just a thing. And if somebody calls me a bad name, it's just Sonic. It's just another Sonic in a world full of Sonic. I'll get over it. You know, I'm not concerned with appealing to the mass. I'm only interested in appealing to people who might agree with me or give me a better idea. You know, I'll upgrade. If someone gets a better idea than me, then I'll upgrade. But as a dualist, and this is what we were studying up there in Bolton, is if you can be moving freely of the constrictions and free of the agony, then you can take on any size dragon you jolly well like, because you will be conscious and you will be unimprisoned by the things that they use to hurt you, which is calling you names and taking away your shit. Isn't that it? Yeah.
Sorry, we've got an interesting question coming from Strider in the chat room there, and Good. She's asking, what personal battles have you won, Mark?
I have won a battle, personal battle, where I've only been here for about just over been here for half a century. That sounds good, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. And my personal battle was realising that to be here, being a pacifist was a bit bloody stupid. Because to be a pacifist in a world which is entirely interconnected to the violent response turns you into a bit of a, you know, you've got nothing. You know, I'm not a girl. I haven't got a flower. I'm a guy. So guys have trouble with pacifism anyway. And then it moved on from there. And I was the sort of chap who surfed through my life with grace. And I've managed not to hit anybody, which is to my credit. And I've only been hit once, which again is to my credit. So I'm not a violent character in spirit or in heart. Too passive, too acquiescent. You know, if a battle presented itself, I would behave like an animal, like a rabbit, and I'd just walk around it. I'd go round it. So I would never... what's the word? I'm looking for a maxim. He who does not right a wrong when he can occasions it. And so I was him. A bit of a chicken, really. A bit timid. A bit of an avoider of conflict with authority, even though I spent most of my time being as naughty as possible. I just hated being caught and couldn't talk my way out of it. So I was fearful. We then got raided by some nice chaps who were intensely interested in our horticultural expression, which they smashed up and took away. We then became versed in law, and then I had to make the decision, was I willing to fight for what I believed in and for the people I cared for? And suddenly it turned out that I was. I decided that I was. I decided, I'm jolly well going to I'm going to fight! I'm not going to avoid the issue, I'm going to fight, I thought to myself. And that big decision came across me and in my heart. And then, lo and behold, the universe said, oh, that's intensely good, Marky. You've decided to fight. Guess what? You don't have to. Because this isn't a fight. Not if you can write a letter. And I realised that the fight was all about words on paper. And so I could be less fearful about that. And the reason I have that confidence now is because I made the decision that I was willing to stand up for what I believed in. And that was the most honourable and noble moment of my life. Because up until that, I had just been a proper little entity in commerce, as you can tell. You know, I didn't do any bullying, but I did bags of lying, bags of cheating, and bags of just letting myself down. You know, that's what we do in commerce. And so these were the upgrades, really. Yes, I got raided by the cops, and I spent a life as a coward. And being raided by the cops allowed me to step up into a manhood which I hadn't experienced before. And I found out that not only did I have all my feminine skills, which are tenderness and charm and being nice to folk and all that stuff, but I also had the red skills, the blade skills, which is actually using an energy and being a little challenging to someone who's trying to be challenging to you. And so it's those harmonies and frequencies where my power comes from. And that was my life lesson. It's been very gentle for me, you know, very, very gentle. It's all just been words and notions with me. You know, no one's ever shot at me or done anything entirely hideous. I've had a nice time, and I'm having a nicer time now that I feel more powerful. And so from that position, they raided us, so we fired them and told them how wicked they were, and then we thought to ourselves, well, fuck this, let's fire everybody else. And so we fired everybody else from our lawful legal position, which comes from The Merchant of Venice, Shakespeare, clever bloke. Mm-hmm. Read him sometime, because in there you'll find everything about mankind currently. All about monarchy, read Hamlet. All about commerce, do The Merchant of Venice. All about young people in love, do Romeo and Juliet. How stupid are they? All about older people in love, Much Ado About Nothing. They're pretty stupid too. All about being fucked around with by metaphysical spirits from another dimension. And that'll be Prospero and the Midsummer Night's Dream and all that stuff. It's all there, fascinatingly. Anyway, I'm going to come back to The Merchant of Venice. The Merchant of Venice, the close in that gorgeous piece is when Shylock is advancing upon Antonio because he's going to cut his heart out because Antonio can't pay his bill. All right, and Antonio made this contract with this blooming moneylender for £1 of flesh if he didn't pay up, and that means his heart. Mm-hmm. And so they're at the court case, and it's not going well. And Antonio is now being strapped to a chair. His chest is being bared as this moneylender is advancing upon him with a carving knife and a whetstone, getting ready to take his prize. At which point, Portia, the clever young girl, disguised as a bloke busy representing Antonio, coming at the last moment, says, Well, that's all very well and good. Of course, Shylock, you may take your prize. However, there is nothing in this contract about blood. You spill one drop of his blood, and you will have the full force of the law turned against you. See? So you can come and put a smart meter in my house, but if you violate me or my stuff or anything else, I've got you with your trousers down, because you're not allowed to violate people. That's the Merchant of Venice, the message of the Merchant of Venice. And that's why we're busy calling thugs thugs, because they hate that. I'm not a thug, you bloody are, so and so forth. And, you know, when you accost a bully with being a bully, it becomes a very intimate conversation, I suspect. And, you know, it's kind of hard to pitch against, because truth resonates with another soul. And there is a soul inside that character who's sending you those shitty letters, you know. It's just deep. Got to reach in. That involves a couple of slaps around the face by being rude and calling them thugs. So, yes, our legal position is you may not racketeer against us and you may not violate us. Therefore, you can't collect upon your contract. Therefore, we're going to see your ass. That's for being a racketeer. That's our lawful position. How did I get to here? Where was I? Oh, yes. So that is what came from that place of deciding to fight. Deciding to fight came from recognising what truth was, which is being able to look into a corporation and see it for what it is, recognising what right and wrong is, and that is that it is bloody wrong to hurt people for whatever reason. I don't care. You don't get to hurt them without their consent. And you should even think about it twice, unless it's a sex game, of course. That's different. But violating people is just entirely wrong. And once one can see right or wrong, one doesn't have any problem with discernment, with knowing what's happening in front of you. And these are the things that came from deciding to fight, because suddenly you need to know what you're doing. You know, dueling in law is no place for the silly and the shouty and the squeamish. You know, you're dealing with professional duelists who have trained all their lives and are utterly, utterly soulless. And, well, no, they're not. Of course they've got bloody souls, but they're just deep within because they're a duelist. They're busy fighting in their lives, and that's what a lawyer is. He fights with words and money instead of swords. They used to do it in the 17th century, and popinjay gentlemen who thought it born an offence would hire a professional duellist to come and sort out his argument for him. And the other chap would also hire a professional duellist. Now, these duellists are proper predators, and they know that they need to live tomorrow to duel again. So they don't want to get hurt. So what they do is they put on a nice show for the two paying clients. One of them takes a pink, which is a tiny piercing, to show that honour is served, and then they both go off and get pissed together. And the mugs are left behind with their silly notions of honour and empty pockets. Now that is that's what a professional duellist does. He fights for the pride of the idiot who has hired him. That's what he does. We don't do it with swords anymore that much. Now we do it with words. And if you take the letter swords, you can get words out of it. And so we make words behave like swords. And when you go to court and when you're dealing with a lawyer or any of these characters, you're dealing with a trained duellist, trained specialist duellist. They've only got 3 or 4 moves, but they use them all the time and they're very comfortable with them. And so therefore, again, whilst deciding that I was going to fight, I decided to learn the nature of my opponent. And then I decided to use all sorts of interesting mystical things, because I'm not good at being cross with people. It fucking upsets me and gives me a tight chest. So I had to get into that love gig, you know. When you love your enemy, you're not busy being consumed by hate or fear. And now you can just pierce him at your leisure, because you're not emotionally engaged any longer. And that's the place I'm hoping to get to. I'm not there yet. I still get a bit excited. It's still a bit rock and roll for me. But I'm sure that I will get to a place whereby I can connect to the consciousness in front of me, and whatever their purpose, it will conclude in my satisfaction, which means that if we're going to be nice to each other, we're going to be nice, and if we're not going to be nice to each other, it'll be short and clear, and then we will both pass in peace, because we understand that the other party is not it has no profit in them. And, you know, arguing cuts the profit line. You know, if you're a client that takes a long, long time to process, and he could have actually processed 3 other clients whilst he's busy trying to process you, he'll go for where the profit is, of course. So I want to be a difficult prey, and I want to be a predator too. You know, it's part of the mask of a duelist. If we live in a world full of duels, which we do, because in nature it's all a duel, except they do it for blood. It's duels. One has to have a certain wherewithal about oneself to be well here, and that means having the power to see truth, to know right and wrong, and to be able to do something about it without violating the other guy. You know, this is the interesting bit, because then you're in soul credit. You know, you don't want to be in soul cost. Violating people is not good. And the law is an interesting one. Universally, the law is this, I think. I think it is what goes around comes around. That's the law in a free will universe. Mm-hmm. You know, it doesn't, because if the law was don't hurt anyone, then we wouldn't be able to hurt anyone. But there's clearly a lot of hurting going on. So therefore, that is not the law. The law is what goes around comes around. And I've seen too much of that to argue with it. And therefore I know that the violaty chappies are going to get theirs. You know what I mean? It's just natural. That's the way it works here. What goes around comes around. So I don't want to be in the business of being a dirty duelist. If I'm at my best, we will duel and we will part as friends who have both shared something like a mindset. Because I'll take his corporate mindset and I'll tear it to pieces as gently and as affectionately and as cheerfully as possible. And hopefully he will go away from me a little disturbed and probably do a little bit of research and find out how fucking nice he is and leave the nasty company he's working for. Because all soldiers, they join because they want to save the princess. You know, guys wake up. They want to save the princess. And that means the police, that means the fire service, that means the army, that means the ambulance service, anywhere you get to be the hero. And this is the selfless act. Men are bred for that. And women are too. And that's in all of us, the selfless act. Mm. And when you start to talk about stuff like that to the soul in front of you, they really start to question, you know, their validity and their position, you know, in life. It's not about commerce. It's not about the technosphere. It's about where you are in your life. And will you take this opportunity to step up in consciousness where the fun is at? Where the fun is at, where the love is at, where the fearlessness is at, where the peace is at, where all the great food and parties are at, where the music is at, and where the lack of hatred is at. You know? Yeah. Thank you. Oh, shut up. Here we go. Oh. Who's not going to turn up to that party? Exactly. I'm safe. There'll be music.
And music as well. Brilliant.
There will be disembodied deities too. Sorry, that's the Almighty. We've got him in the corner of the kitchen.
I was just thinking, I haven't got that jingle. Where's that coming from? You got me there.
You sweetheart.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they'll step up any time they like. They just need to be shocked into it or seduced into it. And I'm a seducer, I think. I look like a shocker, but I'm actually a bit of a seducer.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I just, you know, it's less blood. It's just nicer. Mm-hmm. It's fucking difficult to be difficult to be bad to somebody who really likes you. So I always start there, because that's my great armour. It's incredibly difficult to deliver a point to a man who you are on the verge of liking. And so therefore, if I'm going to duel for real, and that's what law dueling is, I make a point of... I don't look down my nose at any of my opponents. I'm not full of contempt or anything like that. I want to see them as equals so that I can assess their condition appropriately, and then I want to coax them into consciousness by being incredibly rude whilst being incredibly cheerful. You know, I find that works really well in my letters. And yes, because I don't want vanquished. And I'll tell you why I don't want vanquished, and that's why I don't want victory either. I just want peace. So I don't go for victory, and because the problem with victory is it brings vanquished, and the problem with vanquished is they're pissed off and they want to get you. Mastery in combat is to leave no enemy behind. Got it? And I don't leave enemies behind. I just leave friends. because I bear them no vicious malice, and because I'm interested in their well-being as much as I am in mine, and willing to take the time to discuss it with them in letter form or whatever, they confer upon me the same service by actually buggering off. It's quite nice. Or alternatively, it just stops. It's interesting, isn't it? And I developed this martial art years ago, and it is superior to all other martial arts I've found. All of them, I hasten to add. And it is called this. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Be the kind of guy other guys don't want to hit.
You still had to do the eye thing.
I still have to do the eye thing. I can't do the voice without the eye thing.
It's pretending to be Chinese.
Yeah. Be the kind of guy other guys don't want to hit. And so the first lesson there is to recognise what kind of guys you want to totally thump. And then be exactly the opposite of that.
Uh-huh.
And that's my combat style. I picked up the sword when I was 13. So this is really interesting. As a puff who really doesn't have the heart to hurt anybody, in order to compensate myself in that area, what I did is I studied fencing and things like that. And I became really interested in swords because they kept the other person at bay and you didn't have to touch them. It was refreshing. I wasn't interested in guns. I found that they're a bit too noisy. So I played with swords and I became a fencer. And I fenced for 30 years, something like that. I really liked it. And I finished with that now because I have a superior skill, which has allowed me to cast the sword aside. And that is to become a master in the sword is obviously to become the master and is to become a beginner in what comes after the sword. Make sense? And so now, I guess my conflicts are less wordy and they're more heartfelt, and I say less and I'm more convincing. That's not happening tonight, of course, but there you go. But yes, so charm means charm. And that's my personal preference. If it does get all desperately nasty and hostile, then I'll look as if I'm being desperately nasty and hostile. But it's actually quite camp, because in my heart I'm not being desperately nasty and hostile. I know I'm just playing with a pantomime, and the hostility of it is in fact a fiction, unless I make it real by adding my own hostility to the thing. So you see how you take the weapon out of your opponent's hand by not giving him anything to engage with in that way. Does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so this is a very gentle style, and I find it very, very effective. And I hope that the listener who asked me that question, about 3 weeks ago, about how I found my change, I hope that gave her as full an answer as I could. There you go.
Thank you.
Oh, sweet.
You were saying earlier that you were a pacifist and you just let things go by. Do you think that's what's wrong with society? Because I talk to a lot of people that you'll show them news stories, you'll say, well, this is happening, and they'll say, I'm too busy for that. I don't want to listen to that. And it's kind of an ignorance is bliss type thing, and it ties into exactly what you were saying.
Yes.
If people realise, then they realise that they have to do something about it.
Yeah, but that's okay, because that's the other 3/4. Remember the audience split. The audience, I reckon that critical mass will look like 1 in 4, because they're hard to miss. And I reckon that I am seeing about 1 in 4 is either in this up to their eyebrows or is in it up to their hips. The young are talking about, when you first become engaged in the horror of this projection, it terrifies folk. And it's all over the place. And the fear is a very, very recognisable game. And what's interesting, I think, especially amongst the young, is that they watch horror films and then they come out into the world and see another one. And once the eye's seen a couple of those things, one begins to get the pattern. And then knowledge engenders consciousness. Familiarity with the event engenders consciousness. I can't remember where I was going with this. What was your first question? What was your question?
Do you think that there's too many pacifists?
No, yeah, the answer is no. Because if you're in pacifism, then that will be the precursor to becoming what I am. Yes. In this world of duality and polarity, generally speaking, we turn into precisely what we weren't. And so, for me, being a totally dishonourable character for most of my life, and having a great time, I hasten to add, I have now become an honourable character with a total inversion of being, and I'm having an even more wonderful time. So it's about upgrading quality. So whatever your dedication, whatever your mindset is one day it will change into something else. And then I'm not a pacifist anymore, but I believe in peace. I'm not a dualist anymore, proper, but I also believe in force. A mental force, a will, a spell, an ability to deal with a lower intellect than mine who is threatening that which I cherish. And if I'm not up to that, then I'm probably not up to being here. Now, if a quarter of us are feeling that way and thinking that way, nothing hideous can grow, really. It certainly can't get big. And it'll certainly modify itself and become modest. Things do that when the environment ceases to tolerate them. And that means the other people in it. And so these corporations, we're already seeing it, Andy. When I see a corporation retract, when I see a corporation shiver at the knees, when I see a corporation muck about with its market profile, when I see a corporation starting to lose a lot of money on these bloody lawsuits, do you mind? We need better lawyers. When I see corporations betrayed by their staff, whistleblowing, etc., I know that corporation is coming to its cave. It's coming to the heavy moment. It may grab a deep breath and sort its shit out, or it may not. And that's just business, and that's just nature. Everything that begins ends, and everything has its moment, and then it has the Justin Bieber moment. And it doesn't matter if you're a meme in the mind, which is what the police force are, or whether you're a pop star. The same rules apply. And if you cease to serve benignly and your customer base doesn't like you, your days are numbered. Your days are numbered. How can it be any other way? When you lose confidence in a corporation, when you lose belief in a corporation, when you lose faith in a corporation, you now have to take ownership of your own life and then wonder what you fill it with. And this is the interesting bit, because I think that if you want laughter and love in your life, then you better bloody well put some in. If you want love and laughter and happy times and joy and those things, then you better be able to manufacture those things yourself so that you can then create a fractal experience in your life and in the lives of others. If you are an imprisoned corporate program, which is the docile and passive currently, then you will not be able to access those powers. You don't even love yourself. That's why you didn't lift yourself to consciousness. And that's your lesson, isn't it? That's your instruction. What's it like to be really fucking bleak? And once you've cracked the whole, being bleak is crap, what you then do, something else happens, then you have a bash at being vivid. And I love to see the dazed and confused, because I know that after they finish being dazed and confused, crikey, they will be something else. How beautiful is that? So nature does it for me, really. I'm only here to have a good time. Crikey. It's interesting, isn't it? You don't actually have to change the world. You just have to buy a new one. And that means not funding those people, and actually funding those people, and probably just getting a reasonable attitude about money, a reasonable attitude about sex, a reasonable attitude about power, and about what it takes to make your love beautiful, and therefore make your life beautiful. And, examine those things like you give a shit. Then your life will upgrade, and you'll lose you will no longer be seduced by flashy packaging and shiny tops and sales assistants with far too much lippy. You know what I mean? This is about quality. And I think that's what the species is going through right now, and I'm excited for it, because it's doing really jolly well. I meet lovely people, blooming everywhere. Even when I'm grumpy, there's lovely people there. And I even went to duelling club up in Bolton, which is not supposed to be full of lovely people at all, because they're duelists. Wow. And they were blooming lovely. I'm glad they're my friends, you know. So I'm seeing this beautiful becoming, and I think that the becoming is not going to be taken on board by leaders. It's taken on board by people choosing just to grow, and you know, a quarter of us, that'll do nicely. The other 3 quarters will follow trend. They have no notion. I've met lots of people who faked being conscious, not conscious at all, obviously. And then it homogenizes its way from there. And, you know, life is a phenomenon. Life is an art piece. There's nothing good or bad out there, because you can't say that about a phenomenon. It just is. And that's why I'm interested in seeing the trends of this phenomenon and the way it upgrades itself. Because it jolly well does. You can see it everywhere if you have the eyes to look. And this is the bloody thing about being a mad-ass, anxious truther who doesn't trust anything, is you tend not to look at all the beauty. You spend all your time looking into the dark. You don't look into the bloody fluffy stuff, like ice cream, children, and parties, and things like that, and love, and really important stuff. You know, you're always looking into the fear. And that is probably what protects truthers from joining one another and actually leads them into their own power. Truthers become powerful individuals, and this world needs to be full of powerful individuals, and those individuals are made from people who made up their own mind and chose not to follow another.
To become self-responsible.
You know it, and that's what the truth movement is about. It's about friends and enemies who are both, you know, and who are powerful in themselves. You know, it's a fantastic antidote to the situation that we're dealing with. And the situation that we're dealing with is, if I could put a metaphor on it, it's rather like this tree that Peck and I saw just recently. It was down by the river, and this tree, fucking great big tree, huge thing, and it had rotted. This core of it had rotted away. So the original life force had left the trunk of this tree, and some wind had knocked it over, which is how we saw the bloody rotted heart of it. There was about 10% of the roots were still engaged. It had fallen from its grand place in the canopy, and it was now lying on the ground. The branches were still solid, and the leaves were still working, even though it had no heart left. They were still going, because that's what they'd always done. But around it, the other trees were closing the hole in the canopy above it, and the secondary growth was romping away, pouring up over this thing as it died its slow and entirely poetic death, because it had once been a tyrant of the canopy, and now it was laid low, dying slowly. And I sincerely suspect that that is exactly the same as this mechanism we're looking at, which has lost its heart, and therefore, once you've got no bloody heart, you know what I mean? It's a bit bleak, isn't it? And so you die, don't you? And that applies to every product, all people, I guess, and all thought memes, all mind codes. And this mind code is coming to an end. The muscles are still working, the leaves are still there, but you know what? The secondary growth is coming right over the top of it, and one day it'll still be there. But we'll all be above it, looking down at it. Some people will be engaged with it. We might even support it, actually. We might even care for it. Because that infrastructure is ours as well as theirs, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I find that, you know, I don't entirely want to be living on baked beans underneath a tarpaulin. So, you know, the idea of interfacing the benefits of today and cutting out the drawbacks, I think, is entirely valid and relevant. And I think that I'm just entirely fucking cheerful about the whole thing. Can you guess?
It does kind of come across, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I still think that people have to grow, but I think the 20% are growing away, and I think they're recognisable in that there's one over there, there's a couple over here. You know, there's two over there, actually. Tom, mate, get a word in edgeways, for goodness sake. Save me from this. You know. In fact, there you go. So, yeah, we're seeing.
Good talker.
You sweetheart. Oh. Right, I'm going to shut up now. Get on with it, chaps. What about something else?
Somebody in the chat room was asking about your ethos and why the fascination with dueling.
Why? Well, because when I look at nature, that's what tells me what it's like in the technosphere, in man land. And we are brought up to believe that everyone is actually inherently good, bullying is bad, thieving is bad, lying is bad, etc., etc. And then we go to school and we have our family homes and we are taught the confusion of it. And I'll give my own example, in fact. When I was something like 7 or something, my father spanked me for stealing. And I did steal. I took all his airline badges and swapped them for gobstoppers and things like that at school and plastic cars. And he'd spent like 20 years collecting these things. So as you may imagine, he was a bit pissed off. And it was the first time he and I had met in that manner. And he said, "Where are they?" And I was a literal and truthful child. And I said, "I don't know." At which point he put me over his knee and walloped me and then stood me up again and said, "Where are they?" And I said, "I don't know." And I was back over the knee again. And I was solid in my defiance because he wasn't asking me the right question. I had no fucking idea where they were. I'd given them to my mates. I had no idea where they were. I'm a literal boy, you know what I mean? And had he asked me the right question, I would have told him the answer instantly because I'm a truthful boy too. But I'm also stubborn as fuck when I'm being violated. And he was violating me for stealing, whilst behind him on the wall were ashtrays from every fucking country on earth that he had nicked on his travels. So to be beaten for thievery by a master thief, even at the age of 7, I could see how shit that was. And I guess that at that point I lost my trust in the world. Because, you know, when you're betrayed by your parent, that's like God, isn't it? You know what I mean? And I appreciate they were doing their best. Now I'm much more light-hearted about it. Now I'm much more forgiving about it. Now I appreciate his position and the service that he gave me, actually. Because the service that he gave me was a lack of trust and an outrage. He didn't give me the power to deal with it, however. But I could recognise trouble at long distance and I could avoid it. You know, that's how I became. Until I became this. Something altogether more argumentative. So yeah, truth. That's what made me a duelist. Lack of trust. If you don't trust anything, my word, you need to have an option. And so dueling became the next option. And I practiced dueling as a sport. And then I lived like a man who didn't need it. I now realise that it's entirely relevant in this game of words / swords, and that is why I talk about duelling. Because when a bailiff meets you, that's a duel. I see this in a very 17th century way. When I go to court, I know it's a dueling club full of professional killers who are trying to kill me, and I'm stupid for turning up. You know, I appreciate that the judge is just the judge, and how he scores the points. And I appreciate that dueling in this world is all about looking like you can kill someone, maybe having to kill some people, but just making sure that you can repel borders. You have to have a certain life force in you to be here. Only the powerful do well here, really well, in their lives. You know, and I'm meek, but don't confuse meek with weak. You know, meek in that I can use love to duel. I can use love to disengage and to parry and to thrust. You know, that's quite a sophisticated. Be the kind of guy other guys don't want to hit. Because if you are prey, and if you're a victim, then they'll come. You know, so you can't be weak here. And we are taught to be weak. We are taught to subcontract all of our intentions and all of our thoughts to a higher power. That's what happened to me after I read the Bible. I realised that my mind was entirely not reliable, and I needed to ask my dad. And that was the central message of that book. And if people make an enormous effort to separate you from your power, which is knowledge of truth and things like that, then that's because it's bloody powerful and it's important. And this is why women have been chattelised for thousands of years, because they're incredibly powerful. You know, That's why they're kept as property. It's a fascinating thing, the way the world controls power and what it looks like. And that's our power as well. And we've had a fabulous demonstration of how not to do it. Therefore, by reason, we know how to do it better, which is just do exactly the opposite. Don't go to the battle angry. Don't go to the battle unprepared. Be prepared. Go to the battle knowing you're going to win because you've done your work. Therefore, you can be relaxed. Know that you're in honour. I won't duel for money. That's a dirty thing to do. But I will duel for honour because that's sole credit. And it's a good thing to defend your brothers and your sisters and your fellow man against these people by swatting them across the nose with a rolled-up newspaper. They are dogs. And they do understand that language. And being able to do that without having them hate you. You see, this is really important, to recognise that even a corrupted corporation would prefer to be something else if it knew what it looked like. And now you become the sort of character who can say so. And once the corporations know that they need to be loved by their client base, otherwise their client base won't tolerate them, they will tidy up their shit. Especially when we stop admiring people who are minted. Because when I see a man who's minted, I see disgrace. I see what's the word I'm looking for? I see a stock in the flow. I see all that good stuff that he could be doing that he ain't doing. And now I know the quality of his character and his heart. Breadhead. So now I know who to look up to. I want to admire people who. Well, who do I look up to? I don't look up to anybody. I look at them. It's a really interesting position. There was a time when I looked up at people and looked down at people. That was entirely divide and conquer. A very, very compromised position. And I prefer to see myself in a planet full of equals, and that therefore means that I have to make a point of being equal to them. And if there's got bullies in it, then you better be interested in a bit of duelling. There's no point in denying that they're not there. One needs to develop one's management skills so that one can manage. One has an autoimmune system for the common cold and all those other things. And one has a mind system for the other common pests, which is like dodgy contracts, like dodgy contractors. You've got to be aware here. If you're not aware, you can't be conscious. If you don't know where you are and how it is, you can't be conscious. And I'm not saying that I know where I am or how it is, because that's that would be a strong thing to know. But I know how it is with the guy in front of me. I know that much, and that's enough. And I know that I have the skill to make him do one thing or another or another. Now what will I choose? And I know that because he's wearing that uniform and because he's locked into a violatory contract in a corporation, I know that he's not conscious. So there's no point being all fucking clever with him. I'm going to have to use love or something like that to distract him, to soften his attack, and then to present my own counter-attack sort of thing. It's probably going to be right. It's probably like arguing between comedians. No one's quite sure what to take seriously. Yeah.
That's great, Mark. We're actually in the last 10 minutes of the show tonight, so have you got any links you'd like to give out, or any way that anyone could get in touch with if they'd like to engage with you?
They can catch up. I don't turn up. Facebook. We're on Facebook. We do. That's Deg N Peck on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And Peck, Michelle Peck, she does all of that, and she's very, very good at it, and I love her very much. And I'm the one who yaks. We have long discussions, and then basically I say what she's told me, and there you go.
That's how partnerships work, isn't it?
You know it.
Mm-hmm.
Margaret Thatcher said, if you want something done, get a woman. If you want it said, get a man. And for all of her evilness, she actually had a point. So Michelle is where the heart of this partnership is, indeed, and an enormous amount of the skull sweat. And I'm just the one who turns up and loves the sound of his own voice and just yaks incessantly until they hang up. We get on quite well like that. And love to everybody out there, and have a wonderful time in this gorgeous place full of ice cream and fun. And do look at the bright bit periodically. Often. At least get a balance on it. At least only spend half the time in the dark and despair and the misery and the fear and the terror. Come out into the light, because it makes you healthier when you go back into the dark to do more darkness eating. And that's what we're all doing here, really. We're just eating the darkness about us and making it a better place. And that goes for Sarah Goodley, that goes for Rob Freeman, that goes for all of you beautiful people who are anxious enough and conscious enough to be concerned about where you are and how it is and where it's going. They don't realise how beautiful and exceptional they are, because they're all bickering, because they're all fucking incredible minds. How can you get incredible minds to be coherent?
Oh, you're all beautiful.
So, the beautiful, vivid way to live a life. Arguing with a common evil. I mean, that's great. I hope to meet you all many lives from here.
I'm glad you're all here.
So am I, because I don't have to do all the... Yes, it means you don't have to do all the work yourself. You just have to do your favourite bit, and somebody else will do their favourite bit.
Well, you band together and you share.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah.
Oh, you see, you're the lovely bit. Oh, it's actually beautiful. Yeah, so there you go. Yeah, well done, everyone. First class show. No more
hug.
Huge hug. No more wars. Nobody turns up for a war anymore, because that's fucking stupid. Nobody hoards money anymore, because that's a bit fucking cheap. Everyone upgrades their values and gets nicer in their life and better at things like love. And you can tell that because people will smile more and hold hands and stop bitching and bickering amongst one another and besting one another. You just accept one another. That'd be nice. I never tell Peck off. I love her. Never do that. See, we don't have that frequency, do we? We don't play in competition. So, yeah. Nice stuff. There you go. Shutting up again. Oh!
Brings about the end of the show. I believe you've got a track lined up for the end of the show, have you, Andy?
Yeah, we've got 3 minutes lined up, so we've got another 3 minutes or so to perhaps you just give out the links for our sites, Tom.
Please check out the Facebook page, Enemy Within Radio, all one word, or if you're searching on Facebook, it's best to search Enemy_Within. It's at Enemy Within Talk on Twitter, and it's www.enemywithinradio.com. And we're live tomorrow on Spreaker.com/Enemy Within Radio at 9 p.m. UK time. Thank you, Deg N Peck, for coming on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having us.
And tomorrow night, Tom, we've got Ben Emlyn Jones on, haven't we?
We have.
Discussing
cool.
the big issue with his film that was taken down due to an alleged copyright breach, which has caused quite a stir.
Excellent. Go, Ben.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then on Friday, we've got Andy Mackey coming back, who was on a couple of weeks ago on the Friday with us. He caught the tail end of the show that Kaz was on with me, and he's bringing us an update on the family that he's trying to save their house in County Durham. So I'm looking forward to that one as well.
Yes, me too.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to say a big thank you, Deg N Peck. It was absolutely fabulous to meet you at Bolton, and I look forward to the next time we meet up.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for having us and letting us romp our way through the Enemy Within. It's been an entire privilege and an honour. And thank you, guys.
Lots of love to you.
Yes.
Well, we've covered some quite dark subjects in our first few shows, so it's nice to have something a bit more light-hearted, as well as inspirational. Yeah.
Thank you. Never underestimate Fluffy. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody, and I'd like to say good night, and we'll see you tomorrow night on Spreaker, or Friday night we'll be back here in the same slot.